Welcome.
Good
Thank you for
morning.
joining us. Yes, what a lovely Monday morning to be here.
Mhm.
Thank you for kind of joining us and giving up your time for today's session. We're really excited to learn a little bit more about you.
Oh, it's lovely to be with you. Thank you, Charlie, and a good morning, and lovely to be with everybody who's dialing in as well.
Great, so we'll crack straight on with the first half of this session. So as a reminder, that's going to be a formal kind of interview with a set of questions, and then after those questions, we'll move on to our student Q&A. So for our first question, just so that those young people that have tuned in and are watching can get to know who you are a little bit better, could you please tell us about your career journey and then what it is you do now?
Oh, great question to start with, Charlie, and really welcome questions in the Q&A as well. So please do get thinking and be direct with those as well. So it's a pleasure to join you, and perhaps I can share a little bit about my journey with you. So I was always fascinated with how things worked. From when I was very little, in 4, 5, 6 years old, absolutely obsessed with how the world worked. Just how our bodies work, how plants work, absolutely curious about that. And when I was 4, my younger sister was born with a disability. She was born with cerebral palsy. And what that had was a huge impact on myself and our family. And what it did for me is start to put me on a career journey that combined being fascinated with science and how things work, but also wanting to make a real difference for people and their health. And ultimately, that combination of things set me on a career journey that set me through, at the time, GCSEs in science and A-levels in science. It took me to university in Bath to do a degree in biochemistry. And as part of that, I was lucky enough to go to Australia and the States as a placement student at that point, which is super exciting. First time I'd lived abroad and was getting paid to do science abroad as well, which is amazing. To be in America and to be in Australia doing science in real laboratories with some of the world's leading scientists was phenomenal. And it really galvanized my passion for being a researcher and the actual business of science and how it works, how discoveries work and how progress is made. And so following that, I was really sure I wanted to do a PhD. I loved being in a lab. I loved everything about the process, and loved feeling like an explorer at the edge of knowledge and learning new things or discovering new things every day. So I came back to the UK and did my PhD in neuroscience at University College London. Met my husband in the lab, obviously, and then did some postdoctoral research in London as well, looking at how, in this case, cells in your brain signal to each other and how that works well in things like memory formation, but also what goes wrong in things like stroke and in disease conditions too. And after that, I had a wonderful few years in the laboratory and made some really important discoveries and published them that I'm really proud about. But I also started to get more interested in how science gets translated into benefits for patients and people in our everyday lives. How do these discoveries you make in a test tube ultimately end up as medicines or treatments you might get from your GP or in a hospital? And that took me to work with other organisations. So there's some amazing scientific organisations, one called the Wellcome Trust, which is one of the world's largest funders of research, and also the British Heart Foundation. So I first joined the BHF in, feeling very old this morning, probably around 2003. Had the privilege of working in a number of jobs, initially with a science focus, but ultimately I sat on the board of the BHF. And then I went to work for a cancer organisation called the Institute of Cancer Research and the Royal Marsden NHS Trust, where I was a governor for 5 years. And then when the position of chief exec at the BHF came open again, it was an absolute pleasure and privilege to return as BHF's chief exec. One thing I skipped over was I also got a scholarship to do an MBA, probably about 10 years ago now, maybe 12. And that's partly because I felt I really wanted to widen my kind of skills and experience from being quite scientific into being more broad around how big and complex organisations work, everything from financial elements to legal and HR. And an MBA was a really quick way, and I'm an impatient person, so I like quick things, a quick way to get broad experience really quickly. So let me take you just a couple of minutes on what my role is and what the BHF is for anyone who might not know. So the British Heart Foundation is a truly magical organisation. It's 62 years old as a charity, and it is one of the world's largest funders of cardiovascular research. It's made of around 4,000 colleagues, so a team of about 4,000 people, and about 20,000 volunteers, mainly in our shops. So we raise money by fundraising, and I was at the marathon yesterday cheering on our 700 runners. So if I'm a bit hoarse this morning, it's because I was shouting a lot. But also we raise money through retail, so sell primarily of pre-loved goods, second-hand goods. We have 700 shops and stores across the UK that do that brilliantly. So by fundraising and selling second-hand items, we raise an incredible amount of money. And in fact, next year, we're going to spend the most the BHF has ever spent in a single year on research. We're going to add £150 million of new research next year, powered by fundraisers and shops. And in fact, we today would fund 1,100 of the world's best scientists across the UK working on some of the biggest problems that affect people, and probably have commitments right now of about £450 million worth of research active. So it's a big organisation with huge reach, and just the magic of it, Charlotte, if I can just finish, excuse me, Charlie, on it, the magic of it is, in my experience, that it attracts super smart people, so people who are interested in science and progress, but who often have been touched by heart disease, as my family have. We've lost loved ones. My dad's had some heart surgery. So it really matters to the people who are in the team, and it's a real pleasure to work with them. So yeah, that's a little bit about my career journey.
Yeah, really, really interesting to hear about, you know, where you started off and that where that passion came from, because I think that's a really key thing to figure out is, you know, where does your passion for something come from, and how's that gonna kind of affect and inspire life. So really interesting, and some really great figures there about kind of all this investment. 150 million is a lot of money to kind of be going in, and hopefully can do some real good in kind of advancing our knowledge. So exciting things coming up in the next year or so, which is really lovely to hear. Yeah, great. Our next question is thinking about maybe what sort of impact and things some of that research might have, and like the impact that the British Heart Foundation, which is, you know, a well-loved British charity, kind of has. And it's, you know, what are some of the ways that people from your industry, be that obviously the charity itself and the researchers you have, are making a difference in the world?
Charlie, such a great question. So I'm really proud of the impact that the research itself has had over 62 years. And my family really felt the impact of that personally. And I'll come back to that in a second, when my dad had surgery recently. So to start with, most of the things we take for granted, if you have a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, or you go through some surgery or you have a treatment, have been in part funded by the work of the BHF. So statins that people take, obviously, to lower their cholesterol or blood pressure treatments, all of those kind of things have been in part funded and developed by BHF supported science. And even things like the simple surgeries we take for granted these days, so a bypass surgery or fitting a stent, there isn't barely an aspect of treatment and diagnosis and care that the BHF hasn't been part of. And that's why we're here. We're here to make a difference for people who are affected by heart and circulatory disease, because it's sadly still the world's biggest killer. It still will affect 1 in 4 of us in our lifetimes, and is something that, of course, we're absolutely driven to make a difference for people and to help people have more time with loved ones and to save and improve lives. It's super simple. And you know, Charlie, in November 21, my dad probably had a minor heart attack and ended up having some quite urgent surgery. And I've never felt the power, the force, the gratitude for what we do as a BHF as keenly as I did waiting for him to come out of surgery. It was just one of those moments when I think when something affects a loved one, that you really feel it in a different way. So just reflecting as we were waiting for him to come out and hoping he was well on what was happening to him and the science behind it and the role the BHF had just made me even prouder to be part of the team.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that was been like, because, you know, as soon as you started talking about the bypass surgeries and the stents, and thinking, I've never once had a thought like, oh, that the British Heart Foundation must have had some sort of research role or impact into all the kind of funding and that side of things that's created these solutions. And I've never once thought about that, but there must be, thousands and thousands of people that have, had success and have been okay because of that research. And that's a crazy thing to think about. And I think something that maybe we don't think about, who or how was this research funded that's helped save this person? So it must have been a wonderful feeling to be able to be a part of the source of where that knowledge came from to help your dad. And I can't imagine the relief and what that must have been like. Maybe some other young people can have a similar sort of feeling and then can relate to that as well, kind of feeling of, and maybe they never considered where that research came from or the impact that the British Heart Foundation truly has. Because even though it's such a big charity, I don't think we always consider what those charities do and what their impact is. I think that's something we can almost forget about, which is a shame, but it's just part of human society, isn't it? You just kind of take it for what it is and don't really think about what it does.
And I'm glad people take it for granted. The kind of advances that would have seemed like science fiction in 62 years ago when the BHF was founded, it's exactly why we're here, that now there are things that are just routine for people. It's things that might, have affected or devastated people before are now commonplace, and that's how it should be. And in fact, if looking forward, I'm just so super excited about the potential still of research. I've spent a lot of time with some of our scientists recently on a couple of big programs, if I could share them with you. And actually in one of the links in the live chat, there's a link to This Is Science. So if any of the young people on the call today want to read more about what the BHF funds, there's a lovely link there you can have a look at. But in essence, there are a couple of things I'd love to share with you. One is there's a massive program called Cure Heart. So that we're funding to the tune of £30 million. So we ask all of the cardiovascular scientists in the world, where do you think you can make the most difference for people? Come and bring your best ideas, and we're going to choose one and fund it. And the Chief Scientific Officer, Patrick Vallance, you might remember him from the COVID pandemic, who's often giving us updates on the science behind COVID. He chaired an international panel that looked at 75 applications of international teams from people all around the world, and chose ultimately one for us to fund. And this program is called Cure Heart, and it's an incredible team between Oxford, Harvard and Singapore, who have a vision to cure inherited cardiac conditions for the first time in human history. They believe they have the genetic tools and the science and the right team to be able to do that. I can't tell you how exciting that is, that for one in about 250 people who might have an inherited condition that means their heart structure doesn't work well and the heart doesn't pump well, and it puts them at risk of disability or sadly early loss of life. This is just transformative. So between that and just the advances in AI to predict heart attacks, for example, and also genetic tools to be able to make a difference for people, there's huge potential right now, and we're just super proud to be part of that and funding so many brilliant scientists to be able to make that progress for people.
Yeah, really interesting. While you were talking, we did post a link as well to the British Heart Foundation Cure Heart page. Yeah. So if anyone does want to have a read about that, they can do that as well. But yeah, really great about where the future is coming, and maybe one day they'll come up with that solution and we'll take it for granted again. Right. And it would just be that solution in so many years. Crazy to think about how such an impact something can have when it's new.
It is. So their vision is literally that at a moment, a genetic condition that you can do nothing about. There's no treatment if your heart goes wrong and you have an inherited structural deficit. You just have to manage the condition. You just have a little injection, and then that you are, after a period, cured of that genetic defect. And for so many families, that is, literally it's science fiction become real. So we're hugely proud to be funding them.
Look forward to kind of hearing more about the project as it kind of becomes research and they learn more. Sounds really interesting. Yeah. Our next question is a little bit of a shift, and we're now thinking about kind of leadership and kind of moving through life and learning more about leading within a company and within a business. So it's how can students think about developing their own leadership skills? And then how do you, once you have a baseline, continue to make sure you're developing those skills as you move throughout your life and career?
What a big question. Do you know, where I'd start is that I think everybody has leadership in them. I see every day leadership in lots of places in my organisation. So I don't think it comes with a title or a paycheck or a badge. I think it comes with people being who they are, being clear about what they're passionate about, and inspiring other people around them to make that happen. And everybody on this call this morning has that in them, no question. In my experience, where I've grown most as a person and leader have been in probably 2 or 3 ways. The first is by watching other people that inspire me and just watching them and learning from them, watching how they get things done, watching how they inspire people, watching them be themselves and not something they think other people should be has definitely been something that has inspired me and that I've learned from as a leader of big and complex teams. The second part where I really learned a lot myself would be in the formal training and development I've done. So over 20 years or so, she says, feeling ancient this morning, there have been lots of opportunities for me to reflect on who I am as a leader. In my MBA, had a great leadership module about what kind of leader do you want to be as well. I've also done lots of personal development in the number of organisations I've had the pleasure of working with. In fact, we have some right now. So we're doing some work, myself and my executive team, of leaders who've all run huge organisations and done things before. The job of it is never done. So we are, as a team, thinking about the impact we have as a leadership team on the 4,000 colleagues and 20,000 volunteers we are here to lead, and also way beyond that. So I guess my last reflection would be, there's so much great stuff out there. You know, if you're interested in just reflecting on the impact you have on people around you, there are loads of brilliant webinars, loads of brilliant sources of support on the, on the web these days. It doesn't take one click, let alone two, to find something that will talk to you. So I think it's never too early to start thinking about that. And so if you want some structure, there's lots of things available to you. The last bit would be feedback. I think feedback can be scary to ask for sometimes, like, how did I do? What could I have done better? I think it's sometimes it takes a bit of vulnerability, because you know, no one likes hearing you could have done something better. But I think asking for feedback and learning to be comfortable with that, and it took me a while to become desensitized, like not be so sensitive about hearing for it, and actively to think there's a power in knowing and asking people, so that you might not want to act on everything they give you, but to hear the impact that you have on people around you. I think it's really powerful. And if you can get to a point where people are doing that honestly and openly, I think you're onto a winner.
I like that kind of feedback thing. It can be really hard to accept that.
Yeah.
It's like so hard, especially if you love whatever it is that you have put forward and are getting feedback on. But that's definitely where the most value for improvement comes from, even if it can be difficult to hear sometimes.
Truly. And Charlie, sometimes I do it with friends I trust as well. It's because it can come from all places. Like, what am I great at that I should not worry about so much, and what are the things where actually I could do with just either being aware of them or doing something about them. And yeah, my friends are great, and husband and family too. It doesn't have to be in a workplace, or it could just be the people around you, you know, to help you recognize what your super strengths are, what you're great at, and should do more of, as well as those things that maybe you might just need to be aware of as well. But I was recently, it's my pleasure to obviously to work at the BHF, but also chair another charity who actually gave me my scholarship to do the MBA. They asked me to come back and chair them. And recently we did around the board table, a similar exercise. I did one internationally recently with another thing that I lead in Europe, and one globally too. Just asking people, just one thing you change or one thing you would give me as a bit of advice. And honestly, the just brilliantest and most useful things came from that. So it can be, I think every single time there's a little bit of me in my stomach that's a tiny bit hesitant about doing it, but I never regret it. Never regret asking for feedback.
Yeah,
and you guys can give feedback today, by the way. So both the speakers of schools, but also I know you guys have got my LinkedIn and my Twitter and Instagram kind of links. So yeah, welcome feedback in all its forms.
Yes, we would definitely, and we will post a feedback form a little bit later on if everyone watching could feed that out. Charmaine really wants it, and we'd really appreciate that. So yeah, what a great little interlude there. But yeah, really great. And I think that, you know, clearly you still are asking for feedback to help you develop as a leader. So it's something that just doesn't stop, and clearly doesn't stop for a lot of people. If you're doing this kind of worldwide at cheering events, and it's still that sort of ongoing thing that you can never stop learning. So our next questions is thinking about the British Heart Foundation, and you touched on this question, I think, while talking about the Heart Cure program that you've got going. So Cure Heart. So what are your predictions about future roles in your industry, whether that's kind of, the volunteering in one of your stores all the way to the research and things like that? Where do we think it might be going for kind of future careers within the heart science and charity sector?
Excuse my cat, who's just joined us actually very vocally, so you're going to have to put up with that. My apologies. Well, firstly, as BHF's first ever female chief exec, I feel really proud that we are making a dent in terms of diversity and inclusion as an organisation. So for 62 years, all of BHF's chief execs and chairs have been men, white men. And so I'm pleased to be part of that progress. So my prediction is, because we're working hard on it, is that we are going to be changing. I think we've got a big programme called Igniting Change at the BHF to look at representation of ethnicity, gender, and a number of other characteristics, neurodiversity and disability in particular, in our research communities we fund, who we are as a team, and in our governance as well. So one big change is, I hope, comes, and I hope we are held to account for our part in that, of making things better and more diverse for people. Some of that's going to take a while, because changing the makeup of some of the most senior scientists in the country and the world just takes time, and some of it is things we can do really quickly just by accelerating hiring policies or development policies. So that's one change. A huge change we've seen already is in our volunteer workforce. So we're so blessed to have 20,000 volunteers, and I love, my job's got lots of lovely things I love in it. One of them is volunteering in the back of stores and having a chat with the volunteers over a cup of tea. And we've already seen post-pandemic a huge shift in volunteering patterns. So the age of our volunteers has reduced enormously as people perhaps are looking for more career development or other. And also just the way in which people want to work with us as volunteers has changed a lot. So those are kind of two changes you touched on. I guess three other things that we're actively, excuse the cat, look at that. You can hear her, can't you, Charlie? It's very noisy. I'm sorry, everybody. It's
also very adorable, so we'll accept it.
if you we'll see if we can share a picture of her with you by the end. But in terms of other trends, things that are exciting us are absolutely scientific trends. So use of data science and AI in our work, and genetic tools. The things that are worrying us are, of course, the cost of living crisis, but also we're really worried about the number of people in the backlog for treatment and care. So through the pandemic, there was a huge impact on people's diagnosis and care, as, of course, all the health and social care services were disrupted, and probably everybody on this call has read stories about ambulance response times being delayed. And so in terms of a trend, what we are fighting for and hoping for through our influencing and advocacy work with government and the NHS is to see the number of 350,000 people in a queue for far too long come down, and see ambulance response times come down rapidly as well. So we're very worried about that. Spend a lot of time with patients and with health services analysing and talking about it. So I hope, Charlie, that will be one trend that we see probably more than others, just really get better faster.
I think you talked about some really interesting topics and things there. from thinking about kind of diversity inclusion. And I totally see how you're right, because it's a big push recently that that this is something that we start tackling now, but it's going to take years for people to become trained. So it's going to take time for that impact to really be seen, but there's things that we can definitely be doing right now that have instantaneous impact. So it's great that you're a CEO and you're talking about these things, and it means that things that matter to young people and things that they're worrying about in their future are being talked about and are being kind of put into place now, ready for when they are ready to kind of enter into the roles that they have.
Yeah. And one of the power of you and everyone on this call here is holding all leaders, myself included, to account for delivery of the change that we need to see as a society. We're doing this as a BHF, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because we believe it will make us more impactful as an organisation. We think it will make our research better. We'll think it will make the health work we do as we advocate for patients, if we're more representative of the people across the UK we're here to serve, that we will be better as a team. So it's a double win of the right thing to do, and it will make us better. We also, and hold us to account, we publish it we've published our strategy, and every year committed to publicly publishing progress, as many organisations have. So there is a power in the data. I'm a scientist, so I would say that, wouldn't I? But there's always a power in data and holding people to their public commitments, in the same way that we have a green strategy, so an ESG strategy. As Europe's biggest reseller of pre-loved goods, we've sold caravans and sofas, t-shirts and books, you name it, we sell it either in a shop or on eBay, that we believe we would have a positive contribution but could still do more. So we have an ESG strategy that people can have a look at as well.
Awesome, thank you. So we've got 2 questions left before we move on to our student Q&A. So our next question, and again, you may have touched on this just in answering that. So what barriers and obstacles do we have to achieve gender equality, if you have anything else to kind of add in addition to what you've already said?
So the barriers, in my view, are courage, clarity and time. So the courage one is, and I believe we've achieved this as a BHF, it takes courage for an organisation of any kind in any business to say we are going to make change. Here are the targets, so the change we want to see and by when, and be clear about that, and it's communications and intent. Partly because you might fail. It's none of us knows the things, particularly after the last couple of years, that might come around the corner. So I think it takes some courage organisationally to put your money where your mouth is and say, okay, we're going to go for this. So, and being clear on that and communicating it clearly, and being honest about some of the change you want to see in the world taking time and why. I think my personal philosophy in life is that as long as you can explain why something is the way it is, most people will connect with you and appreciate the kind of journey you're on. So those things. Other barriers, I'm excited. I'm an optimist in life anyway, but I can see change happening every day, and I know it's hard work, and young people on this call may have experienced discrimination or indeed disadvantage today. I believe we're getting better. I hope we're getting better. And again, really holding myself and the organisation to account for being part of that change. In terms of barriers, one of the things that you just made me think, Charlie, is, it is a huge privilege to be Chief Executive of BHF and to have a couple of other roles that I'm really proud of too. There's something about that sometimes the barrier is within you. It's around feeling you're good enough, feeling you can do something. And women in particular have been proven through scientific studies to perhaps underestimate their value and power sometimes. So I think probably the last barrier is just being aware that all of us, regardless of gender or other factors, will have some view of ourselves. And so sometimes there's a little barrier in ourselves as well.
Definitely, and you can feel that, and I'm sure everyone will experience this at some point. You'll apply for a job and you'll think, oh, am I good enough for this? And you should just do it anyway, because you have absolutely nothing to lose, and you just never know. But that is a huge barrier, and I have experienced that throughout my life, being like, oh, am I good enough for this? Right. Probably not. There's going to be more people that are better, but that's the thinking urge that we need to kind of overcome within ourselves. And our final question before we move on to our student Q&A, and thank you for those questions that have already come in. We're going to get round to you in just a second. So our last one, real quick, is can you tell us a typical day in your role?
Or the only thing that's typical is how it starts. So most of my days start about 6 a.m. with a pot of tea, and I'll usually have a quick look at email just to get an idea of what's happened overnight or if there's anything that might change the day. And then I'll put email down and go for a walk or do some exercise and look after myself before the demands of the day begin. I usually, so today I'm working at home. I have the pleasure of doing that perhaps once a week or so, but we've also got offices. We have 7 big offices across the UK. We've got 700 shops, 1,100 scientific sites, and also wonderful partners who work around the world as well. So in terms of where and what I'm doing in a day, it can vary enormously. So last week I was in Boston chairing a conference. Next week I'll be in one of our shops and stores volunteering, and tomorrow for the next couple of days we'll be in our London office hosting a fundraising event, and then getting a chance to thank some of our incredible supporters. So Charlie, the only constant is really the tea. Everything else is then hugely varied, and that for me makes it incredibly rewarding. Not a massive fan of repetition. I always like to learn things. I'm deeply curious about how things work. I think I've talked about that in science already. But also I love people. I love being with people. I like learning about them, about hearing their stories. And I'm curious about how people's lives and how they work together. And in my job, of course, curious to hear what matters to people. Because again, that feedback of how are you doing? What's your experience been like? What's it like to be funded by us and do science? What's it like to donate to us? What's it like to work for us is constantly helping us get better.
Awesome, great. What a nice way to finish a formal interview. We're now going to move on to our student Q&A and dive straight in there. We've had some questions come in from Haggerston at Year 8 Female Heroes, and we're going to start with one from them. They've both pre-submitted this question and put it live, so clearly they would love to get it answered, so we're going to start with it.
Well done, you guys.
It's what is your life's motto and why?
So this one's firstly, did you say the Haggerston Year 8 Female Heroes?
Certainly did.
Love the name. Well done, you guys. I wish I had a team name like that. I'm going to work on that later today. Probably my motto would be love what you do and do what you love. I think there's nothing better for me than finding things that I really love being part of or doing, and making sure that in the choices I'm lucky enough to have, that I gravitate towards those things. I think it's really easy to get swayed in life by what other people think. When I was probably your age, my parents, my friends, people around me, it was really easy to kind of be swayed, or I found it hard not to be swayed by perhaps what they might want for me, what their ambitions and dreams were for me. And to a large extent, that's always there. It's just different, perhaps slightly different people now that do that for me. So that sense of being really clear about what I'm passionate about, where I think I can add the most value, and then holding on to that is really good. So that brings me to my motto. So it's pretty much do what you love and love what you do. You can have it either way around, it works. But for me, that's a little touchstone of when I get an opportunity, am I going to love this? And if I'm not going to love it, maybe not do it.
Yeah, I think there's some really good bits in there, particularly about finding your passion and remembering that it is your life. I know that growing up, it's so difficult to deal with other people's expectations, and other people's dreams can be so difficult to kind of deal with, but really being aware of yourself can help with that one.
Yeah, truly. So my dad's a musician. He's the most lovely man. I love him to bits. I'm really glad that he's well after his surgery. And he was absolutely gutted. I went for all science, A levels and maths. He was like, do you not want to do a bit of English or a bit of geography, just something to soften that up? Gutted. He was so, it was so important. He couldn't understand the kind of journey. But yeah, super proud now as a lovely dad. And you're right, just holding on to what you know. I think we all know in our hearts at some point what's speaking to us. So holding on to that's important.
Wonderful. So our next question has come in anonymously, and it's can you tell us more about studying science abroad? Was it different to doing the research in the UK?
I loved it, actually. It was, so the business of science, so like being in a laboratory, the techniques, learning all the skills that scientists need, and the kind of methodology of science, which is kind of coming up with a hypothesis, testing it through an experiment, learning from that, and then evolving, is the same the world around. And it's probably been the same for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So the tools and techniques may have changed, but the discipline of science is as much universal as well as timeless, I think. What I loved about it was, so I was 19 when I was in the States and 20 when I was in Australia for 6 months on my own, is the growth that I learned about a new culture. It was a safe, supported and paid way to travel and get to know new people. And as someone who'd only ever lived in the UK until that point, it really opened my eyes. It made me appreciate the world and understand cultures in a different way. So anyone thinking about science as a career, I would definitely encourage you to have to get involved. And there's some great organisations that can help give people exposure to what it's like to be in a lab. So the British Association for Science, there's lots of lovely organisations that work with schools and individuals, because it's great life. You get to work internationally. It's the nature of the community is international. You get to travel often and have a lot of freedom and agency. It's not without challenge, constantly looking for funding. The academic environment can be hard, as can the commercial, but it is a really interesting and fun life. So I definitely encourage anyone with a spark of science interest to find out a bit more.
Awesome, thank you for that one. I'm going to keep cracking on as we only have
Sure.
under 10 minutes to go, get as many done. So I'm going to go back to the Year 8 female heroes, and they have asked, what advice would you give an inspirational female who wants to achieve your success?
Be yourself. Everything you need to do whatever it is you want, you've got in you already. You might need to learn a few things or get a bit better connected or do some formal training, but honestly, being you, in my experience, and trying, holding on to that through your life is the most powerful thing. It's where confidence and clarity come from. People can tell when you're really being yourself. So I would, if you're interested in becoming a chief exec, and it was never part of my plan. I don't have a career plan, actually. I just try to follow opportunities that I believe I can bring something to and that matter to me and that I love. And this is one. I just say be you.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next one is, how can I get work experience in your industry?
Great question. So if anyone wants to connect after this, you've got my social media links in the side chat. In terms of work experience, there are schemes that happen across charities and in universities. Some of them are age restricted just because of the nature of the environments, but it still exists, so have a look at those. And indeed at the BHF, we're really blessed. We do the Duke of Edinburgh Award. We've got volunteers who come to us all the time in our retail operation, but also across the BHF for fundraising and others. So if you're interested in volunteering and finding out more, let me know.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we'll probably get maybe 2 more before we end the session. So let's go for how do you keep a team motivated if you're having kind of conflicts and coming across obstacles?
So this happens every day. I've had 2 conflicts this morning already, and it's not even 11 o'clock. So a couple of calls this morning. The motivation part for me is pretty simple. It's about reminding people of our purpose, which is to help save and improve lives. And if what we're doing moves us towards that and gets us there faster or makes more of a difference, let's do it. If it takes us away from that, let's not. So the kind of motivation, both yesterday I was at the marathon cheering on our 700 runners. So each of those has a story. They have a why. They've lost granddads and parents. They've got children who've got congenital heart disease. They've had something that's touched their lives, and that motivation is a bit of the BHF magic, because we have an abundance of that, and it fuels us. It motivates all of us. So in terms of motivation, there isn't any shortage, because it's rocket fuel, and we make sure that we're motivating people towards making more difference. Conflict's really interesting. It took me a while in my life. I'm not a conflict enjoying person. I like harmony, like consensus. You know, that was the same with my family too. We weren't massively conflict, luckily. So managing that is always about listening to people first and foremost. Why does it matter to them? So for me, there's listening and being really clear on the data. So what is it that's being disagreed, and is it that they have different sets of information and they're just seeing a situation differently, or is it fundamentally something about values and or something emotionally that's connected with someone that means that they think about something differently? And for me, the start point is always really listening. What's really going on here, and digging in a bit. And I've worked with so many wonderful people that honestly, as long as you can feel safe to be honest about what matters to you with people, there's never been a conflict that we've kind of not gotten through. But that safety is important. You have to be able to say what you think and say what you mean, and create an environment where people can do that. And we work really hard to encourage colleagues, however hard they feel something they have to say is, to be able to say it. It makes a big difference.
And for our final question, before we come to you for closing comments, we'll go back to the Haggerson Year 8 Female Heroes, and we'll finish with what was your greatest achievement and why do you do what you do? Which I think you may have already said that little last bit already.
Oh, that's a tough one, you guys, to finish on. Thank you for that. You're making me work this morning. So the why I do what I do is that I believe in the power of research to save and improve lives. And in particular, I lost both of my granddads, a grandma and an uncle to heart disease. They had heart attacks or heart failure. And my dad's recently had surgery and is luckily well and robust and funny and himself again. And that personal connection of it matters to me personally super deeply. What we do and why, and the fact that intellectually I just love the science. I could listen to it all day. It excites me. I'm curious about it. I love the technical details and the cutting edge of science. It just means I have the best job in the whole world. It's fantastic. In terms of best achievement, it's really hard. I don't think there's a best one, but one thing that happened really recently that just brought a tear to my eye is this beautiful little boy called Dahi in Northern Ireland, who has been born with half a heart. He's 5-6 years old. I've met him, the privilege of meeting him and his family many times. He's poorly. He really needs a heart transplant. He's got little blue fingernails and his lips are blue, but he's a huge fighter. He literally likes boxing. He's a little fighter. And his family campaigned for law change to make organ donation more easy in Northern Ireland. And 3 weeks ago, we were with him at the House of Commons to get that law passed, and that law has been enshrined as Dahi's law in his honour. And I think, for me, that's just such a special moment to see such a little boy who's so poorly making a life-changing, law-changing, world-changing step forward. So it's a privilege to be part of that with his family.
What a awesome achievement to end on, almost making me bring a tear to an eye just thinking about it.
So lovely. Do look at him up. He met Rishi Sunak last week for a Point of Light award. He's just the best little boy in the world. He's lovely.
So before we close today's session, do you have any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to leave our young people with?
Well, firstly, thank you for making the time to listen. I really hope it was useful to you or insightful. And the very fact that you're tuning in and listening to these kind of things with Speakers for Schools, I think is brilliant. I think my last advice would be probably repeating that sense of motto is, I believe everybody on this call has in them what they need to follow their passions in life, whether that be leadership or something else. Whether it be science or something else. And I just really encourage you to be as much yourself as you can be and really listen to the things that matter to you in life, because only good will come from it. So yeah, be more you would be my last word. And do you want to see the cat, Charlie? Because I'm really sorry she's so noisy. But this is Jack. She's looking very grumpy. I don't know why she's grumpy. Oh, look at that. So yeah, I'm going to say apologies for her disturbance and surprise guest appearance this morning.
It's all right. I'm sure it brightened many a young person's day. Thank you for joining us. It's been so wonderful to have you on and hear about you and your career and everything that the you know, British Heart Foundation does, and what a wonderful note to finish on. I'm going to be thinking about this as I go through the day, and hopefully our young people will too. Thank you for joining us.
Take care.